Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Please find your seat. So, Jazakumullah khair for staying for the second general talk of tonight. Sheikh Akram, inshallah, will talk to us about the wisdom behind trial through hardship. Can I please ask everyone to have a seat? Assalamu alaikum. Okay, so inshallah we'll start now, and inshallah we'll end by around 9:20, and then after that between 9:20 to 10 it's going to be 4 questions either on this topic or the previous topic. Before I cut here, I would like to remind everyone that tomorrow inshallah we have 2 more topics. The first topic is after Fajr. It's Fajr Khatira, about Adab al-Ikhtilaf, the ethics of dispute in Islam. This is after Fajr, and then the second one would be after Dhuhr. This is a youth talk about the manners of Islam, rights of others in Islam. Sheikh Akram, please.
Assalamu alaikum. We need your help with the children situation. We don't have set up child care. I apologize. It's an oversight. But please keep your children next to you. There is space there if moms want to sit with their children. They can, of course, they're welcome to stay here, but please keep the noise down. Jazakumullah khair.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala Rasulullah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Welcome back. How are you guys doing? Are you guys okay? Like I can talk all day. This is what I do for a living, so it's like no problem for me, but I don't know if you guys want to listen all day. Like it's just, So if anybody is like tired and is like, just shut up, I'm not going to be offended. Just like, you can let me know, no problem. So, as you know, the topic that has been proposed is, well, why do people, suffer? God's existence and the problem of evil. So, sorry? Common type of khutbah ever. Yeah. Beautiful. I agree, right? I think the situation in Gaza has also opened our eyes a lot about, this topic as well. But the existence of evil, it offers neither a logical nor probable case against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's existence, no matter how much atheists try to make that the case, right? Because Islam offers a comprehensive theodicy. What is theodicy? Does anybody know what theodicy is? Yeah. Theodicy is, generally, it is the attempt to answer this question, right? It's the attempt to answer this question of the problem of evil. Now, Islam offers the most comprehensive theodicy, and that is a systematic solution of the problem of evil, right? So first, let's talk about what makes evil a problem. What makes evil a problem to begin with? So evil, in the word, has always been a problem. But it is only in the past few centuries that it has translated into a revolt against Allah and religion. Now why is that? What's different about now? Well, similar to what we talked about in the beginning of the last topic, there has been a Western mindset shift from what is the purpose of life to what is quality of life, right? So centralizing life in this world as the focus, which is a byproduct of the 18th century Enlightenment period in Europe. And this radical shift of focus, where people's means of living is chasing a pursuit that is unattainable, which is worldly pleasure, is what leads to a lot of life's frustrations. It's what leads to make life unbearable for people, right? When your total existence is reduced to this life alone, then you're no longer able to make sense of a greater goal. So it can be expected that when someone, right, it could be expected that ensuring immediate pleasure and avoiding pain would become the sole objective of every human being if you remove God and religion and soul from the equation. But these are unattainable objectives, right? كَسَرَابِ بِقِيعَةِ يَحْسَبُهُ الظَّمْآنُ مَاءً. That it's like a mirage in the desert, that you think there's water, and when you run to it, what happens? There's nothing actually there. This is the similitude of this worldly life. This is what it is. that you're running towards eternal pleasure, but you're not going to find it here, right? So it's no wonder that Western communities in particular, despite their many luxuries and comforts, are constantly faced with this issue. They're grappling with the problem of evil, right? Because what I can tell you for sure, that the people in Gaza are not asking this question. Okay? They are not asking this question. What are they asking? They're not asking, where is Allah? They're asking, where are you? Where are you to help? They know Allah is there. They're not asking that question, right? Societies that have been built on religion as their moral, as their ground set, tend to not ask this question, right? So we see this as actually an anomaly in Western communities. That's the first thing, okay? And honestly, we could end the lecture here. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, right? But no, we're going to go into it more, inshallah, so that we can have a clear thought. So a life without meaning, every pinch is unexplainable. It's unavoidable. Every random event can also be classified in terms of energy and matter. It's all chaos, it's all commotion, it's all coincidence, it's all tragedy, right? So it's natural and understandable that the problem of evil will be amplified in any age to people who have this particular sensitivity, right? Especially people, as human beings, our fitrah, if you're not a sociopath, your heart aches when you see a child in pain. Your heart aches when you see an elder in weakness. Your heart aches when you see a victim scream of pain. However, it's also important to consider how the average person, in modern times, enjoys an unprecedented amount of luxuries that has been allowed by technological developments, right? So we constantly talk about evil, but we're not talking about good. So consider how many medical advancements have been done, how much prevention of diseases, pain management, access for the disabled, right? Now, while these developments have benefited human life immensely, they've also heightened our sensitivities to weakness and pain. Does that make sense? So the more technological developed that we get, the less tolerance we have for hardship, because we want things to become easy for us. And so while this is happening, especially in a society that does not have religion at its center, then the rise of the ego begins. And after the French Revolution, not only did the age of empires meet its demise, but centralized nations also followed suit, and there was a shift in culture and society from family bonds, and now it's focused on the individual, right? So relationships is deconstructed into individuals in a relationship rather than a family unit, a body operating as one with different roles and contributing to society. So now all that remained standing was the human ego. That's all that remained standing, which is actually, kind of monstrous, because it focuses on the self. It focuses on desires, right? It focuses on the individual as the supreme, not Allah, not the soul, not the religion, but rather the human body and itself as the supreme. And naturally, when people break from family structures and focus on individualism, people will stop seeing themselves as part of a greater collective. And they begin seeing their own interest as what is the priority. So when you see suffering and strife of others, it does not lead to empathy and solidarity. It's a climate that ends with, or begins with me and ends with me. Evil is no longer a mere problem, but it actually leads to a slow suicide of a deaf and uncaring world, right? So the modern man is in delusion. I'll take questions at the end, inshallah. The modern man is in delusion, right? We have so many breakthroughs, we have so many discoveries, but we have deluded ourselves to assume that because we have so many breakthroughs and discoveries, that we now understand everything in the universe. We can for sure determine what is absolute certainty, what does exist and what does not exist, right? And again, this is a delusion. This is ego. In other words, a secular person now perceives themselves as the master of the universe, right? I can conclude based on what my eyes can see whether something does not exist or does exist, right? And whatever my mind cannot recognize, then it must be foolish. And this is the unfortunate state that we're seeing of how people have faith in Allah these days and that they essentially don't have faith in Allah. So first and foremost, the link between the existence of evil and the existence of Allah must never remain unchallenged, right? Meaning that these are two separate issues that should not be conflated. Many people assume that since evil exists, that Allah must not be all-knowing, or He's not all-caring, or He's incapable of removing that evil. Because God is understood to be who? The all-merciful, the omnipotent, the omniscient. And so the assumption is that the existence of evil implies what? That Allah must not exist if evil exists. But when we are believers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the existence of evil is actually not a problem, because evil does not make us despair. So someone who doesn't believe in Allah may question why evil exists, but that question actually has a lot of fault in the question itself. First of all, asking why, right? I'm going to have a Jordan Peterson moment. Are you guys ready? Right? The question that you're questioning is just as questionable as the question, right? Okay, so you guys ready for this, right?
No, please don't.
No. Yeah, I'm just messing around, right? So first of all, asking why implies that a person assumes there should be an explanation, which is a subconscious that we all have in our life, that we as the masters of the universe are owed an explanation because we don't understand. And it goes back to what I was mentioning in my khutbah. We flip the relationship around. Who is the abd and who is the Rabb? Who is the servant and who is the master? Right? First of all, right, and I know people don't like hearing this, but Allah does not owe us an explanation. I'll offer some wisdoms today. I will, I promise. Okay? But it does not owe us an explanation. The second thing of asking why evil exists reveals that we see ourselves as moral creatures. But this immaterial quality of morality has actually no place in the atheist view to begin with. Only things that can be seen is real. Morality cannot be seen. I promise I'll take questions at the end. Promise, Habibi. Don't worry about it, right? The third thing is asking why evil exists reveals that one perceives evil as being abnormal and good as the norm. So therefore, before we ask why is there evil, someone who's fair, someone who's rational, should actually first ask the questions, why does good matter? What is good? And why is there so much good? Understood? So, consider that we have a lot of period, the average person, you live more of your life in health than you do sickness in an average lifetime, right? Or those impaired versus functional across the human race. Or the moments where arteries flow versus the moments where arteries clog throughout our lives, right? Or the decades of prosperity versus the ruin of an average civilization, right? Civilizations have a lot of prosperity, and then when they fall into ruin, they fall very quickly, right? They fall very quickly. So times of good actually outweigh times of bad and times of so-called evil, right? Even when we look at something like an eruption of a volcano, right? And look at something like that, we think of it as like, why did this happen? Because it caused so much destruction. But in reality, from an eco or environmental perspective, it actually rejuvenates the environment, right? So we may see something to be as evil and something we don't understand, but it produces a lot, there's a lot of good that comes from the so-called evil that we perceive, right? Does anybody know what the second law of thermodynamics is? You know what it is?
Yeah, everything tends towards a state where everything is equal and there's not much of a pattern to what's going on.
Yes, correct. MashaAllah, tabarakallah. Right, takbir. You want to give the lecture?
No.
Okay. So, to rephrase what the brother said, is that it's this idea that there's a degree of disorder and randomness, right? That we lived in an isolated system that has no external influence and will always increase, and that this process is irreversible, right? In other words, organized things will always break down and dissipate unless something from the outside pulls them together, right? So, because of that, blind thermodynamic forces could never have produced anything good on their own, nor made good widespread as it is, without a creator organizing the randomness, the chaos, into the marvelous things that we see today, the beauty, wisdom, joy, love. Only after establishing that the norm is good, we hope to grasp the exception of evil, right? So, again, all of this mumbo-jumbo philosophy stuff that I just mentioned, okay? Essentially, the khulas of the kalam, the summary of the kalam, is we're asking the wrong question. You're assuming that evil is the default, and so you're asking why evil exists. When in reality, the default is good, and evil is the exception. And there's no intelligent person that denies the brilliance of the creation of the earth, or the brilliance of the beauty of the earth, right? The same way that no intelligent person would ever deny that when they see a mountain or see a big massive mansion, a castle that contains thousands of rooms, and every room is stunning, all of it, it's beautiful. And then there's one room or a few rooms that are unpleasant. It would be ludicrous to claim that this wondrous castle is now just a bunch of steel, wood, wires randomly smashed together because we cannot make sense of the few rooms. Does that make sense? Right? Sorry, Habib. Yeah, go ahead.
You were talking about thermodynamics earlier. An extra caveat, a lot of forces from outside definitely influence the earth and could change the entropy of the individual system.
Yeah, absolutely. Jazakallah khair, Habib. All right. So, perhaps there's wisdom to this, right? Perhaps the person enjoys these unpleasant rooms because it reminds them of a humble beginning. It reminds them to never take blessings for granted. There's a wisdom to why the person who built the castle decided to build the rooms in that way, right? And so, again, وَلِلَّهِ مَثْلُ الْأَعْلَى, the example of Allah is far greater. So we look at it from the perspective that what? That when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created this world, there is a wisdom to the exceptions that we don't understand. But it's not random, it's not chaos, okay? Before I move on, is there any questions? Because now we're going to get to the actual Quran Sunnah portion of the lecture. I know so far it was just like a bunch of philosophy stuff, but now we're going to go to the Quran Sunnah part of the equation. So yes, Habib, go ahead.
You mentioned a lot about how atheists act. You say, oh, they all believe they're masters of the universe. Oh, they all believe they know everything. Are you referring to a very specific group of atheists, or do you assume that to be the whole?
I'm not talking about individuals, I'm talking about the belief. Right? Does that make sense? So I separate individuals from belief. So, and I'm not necessarily talking about what they say word for word. I'm saying what they say implies. Okay?
And a lot of the time, like, what they do implies something different. Like,
Yeah.
a number of atheists decide to pursue a scientific field and act they know they don't know something.
Yeah, 100%.
And they openly say that, like in physics, we don't know exactly where dark matter is, what it's really comprised of. Do you think that that specific group of atheists would be considered the majority, or just the vocal ones? Or really the ones you don't consider to be agnostic, or again, do you see that to be the whole?
Yes and no, right? Yes and no, right? So when it comes to any religion, there's never going to be an anomaly, right? No two Muslims think alike, so why am I going to expect two atheists to think alike, right? So two Muslims who have structure and principle don't think alike. How are two people who have no structure and principle going to think the same, right? Going to think the same. So it's not going to be in that case, right? But I'm also not focusing necessarily on atheism as a belief, but as a societal ideology like liberalism, right? Which is attached to atheism in the sense that the removal of God and the removal of the soul and religion from the equation of humanity. So I talked about this in the first session, but just a refresher, the Declaration of Human Rights, they needed to first define what is a human being, right? Before you can go on and determine what rights a human being has, you have to define what a human being is. The problem is that their definition of human being was flawed because they couldn't agree on what to define the human being as. Because all the Eurocentric nations had different ideologies and theologies about the soul, God, and religion, and how these things manifest in the human being. So they decided what? Instead of focusing on intangible things that we can't see, let's just focus on the material. So now when you do that, the human being becomes the center, the focus of rights, of morality, and not God and religion and soul, right? So this is what we're addressing. Does that make sense? Okay, Jazakallah khair. So, now the wisdom behind evil, right? So the Quran and Sunnah do not simply claim that the existence of evil can be rationally reconciled with the existence of an all-knowing, all-powerful, most compassionate God, right? The Quran and Sunnah affirms that there is a discernible wisdom behind what may appear evil. So Islamic theodicy involves reason guided by revelation. And while there exists profound wisdom behind every evil in the universe, evil, right, in quotation marks, we as finite beings can only understand these wisdoms on a general level. We should also understand that a wise God would not reveal to us every wisdom in order to guarantee that the test of life, which is a test, does in fact serve as such, a test, right? Because what is the definition of Islam to begin with? Who knows? Submission, right? Islam means submission. So if there's not an aspect of faith, of submitting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then there's a problem in our aqeedah or our spirituality regarding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His message. So, so these specifics should not be written off as irrational, first of all. Rather, they should be supra-rational, which means beyond our understanding. And this should not deter us from trying to appreciate why Allah allows them to exist. Right? In simple terms, it's a 5-step process. Number 1, Allah is the most wise. Okay? Agreed? Agreed. All right, you don't get to disagree on that one, okay? Allah is the most wise. Number 2, Allah's wisdom necessitates wisdom behind everything that exists. That's number 2. Number 3, Allah's wisdom necessitates that some evils exist for profound reasons. Number 3, God's wisdom necessitates that for life to qualify as a trial, the reason for every evil cannot be immediately disclosed to those under examination. Yeah. Oh, sorry, yes, you're right. Sorry, my bad. Jazakallah khair. Number 4, Allah's wisdom necessitates that for life to qualify as a trial, the reason for every evil cannot be immediately disclosed to those under examination. And number 5, Allah's wisdom necessitates disclosing some of the main reasons behind evil to help brace people as they navigate the hardship of life. Let's think of an example that we may be able to relate to, and as always, وَلِلَّهِ مَثْلُ الْأَعْلَى. Let's say you go into an exam session, right? And by the way, the test of life is even easier than an exam session because you're given the answers. It's right, there's a book that tells you the answers. You just gotta do it, right?
You also get that book on the test.
And you get that book on the test, open note exam, right? This world, this deen, this life is an open note exam, right? If you fail it, it's on you, man. Like we did, yeah.
Right there,
It's,
already taken for you.
absolutely, Habibi, absolutely. So, you're in an exam room, and you are answering the questions, and you don't know the reason behind the question, or you think this is the right answer, but you're not sure, okay? So you call on the teacher to help you that you understand the question to begin with, okay? Based on the response of the teacher, most of the time, you're gonna get a hint on whether you're actually answering the question correctly or not. But they're not gonna expose the answer to you, okay? So this is the similarity here. That you are going to have to trust Allah's wisdom because that's the test. But I will give you signs that you're on the right track. I'll give you signs that you're on the right track, right? Now, before diving into these main wisdoms, it must be said that one of the most foundational concepts of Islamic theodicy is that pure evil does not exist, right? There's no counterpart to Allah. There's no evil God that does evil and then a good God that does good, right? So one of the best people to write on this is Ibn al-Qayyim, who I've mentioned a lot during this weekend, so you should be familiar with him now, Ibn al-Qayyim al-Jawzi, who's perhaps one of the greatest theologians to write on this topic, and he says, and I quote, "Evil as an independent phenomenon whereby no dimension of good is involved has no existence in this world. There is nothing in our existence that can be called pure evil because every evil in this world is good from one angle or another. For instance, sickness harms the body from one angle, while from other angles, tests patience, evokes resilience, and may even strengthen immunity. Most disliked things are usually this way, never void of some benefit or another for the human being. كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الْقِتَالُ وَهُوَ كُرْهٌ لَكُمْ وَعَسَىٰ أَن تَكْرَهُوا شَيْئًا وَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ." It is very possible that something that you do not like is actually good for you, that is prescribed upon you. وَعَسَىٰ أَن تُحِبُّوا شَيْئًا وَهُوَ شَرٌ لَكُمْ. Right? It's very possible that there are things that you love that are not good for you. Okay? I love Nutella a lot. Okay? It's a problem. Okay? It's not good for you. No, it's not good for you. So it's possible. You can love something that's not good for you, and you can not like something, right, that is actually good for you. And that is our trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? So this golden principle that I just mentioned with Ibn Qayyim al-Jawzi's quote, it stands true for both naturally occurring evils and for evils that are committed by willful agents, meaning insan and jinn, right? Allah allows these things to exist because the good of their existence outweighs the good of their inexistence. So for naturally occurring evils, consider how volcanoes are not pure evil, because they rejuvenate the ecosystem. It makes life on earth possible, right? It builds islands and mountains, right? So without volcanic eruptions and all they release, farming communities will not be able to grow food. Certain materials would not be available. The atmosphere would not have an oxygen-rich environment. These are all things that are associated with volcanic eruptions. So in this apparent world, natural evil that we see, there's actually a lot of good that comes in it. And when it comes to evils that are committed by the willful agents, insan and jinn, consider how even, right? And again, right? Sometimes I just have to disclose, please let me finish my thought before you judge me, okay? Even the existence of shaitan is not pure evil. Because he was not created to misguide people, as commonly misunderstood. He chose to misguide people, and he arrogantly rebelled using the will that he was given. Before shaitan was the cursed shaitan, who was he? He was the greatest worshipper of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala before his downfall. There is a weak narration, and I preface it as weak so that it's clear and we're transparent, but there's no handspan of length in this world that shaitan did not prostrate to Allah to, right? He was amongst the angels because of his high status. He was seen as the greatest worshipper of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He believed in Allah more than any of us because he spoke to Allah directly. He understands Allah more than we do. But what was his issue? He was arrogant and he rebelled. And the sin that is associated with shaitan is أَنَا خَيْرٌ مِّنْ I am better than him. Because of the way that you created me, I am better than human, than Adam alayhi salam. Also known as racism. Okay? I apologize if this sounds harsh. Not really, right? But if you believe that you are better than someone, if you believe that you are better than someone because of the way that you were created, you have something in common with shaitan. Okay? With the devil, with Iblis. So, anyways, back to the point. The reason why I mentioned that his existence isn't in of itself pure evil is because shaitan, what does it do? It gives Allah, or it gives the slave of Allah, it gives the slave of Allah a target to push back against. Right? It gives us a target to push back against evil. It encourages us to seek refuge in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It encourages us to learn lessons from the life of shaitan and protect ourselves from pride and conceit and arrogance and much more. So there is good in his creation. Ajib, right? But that is the mindset of a Muslim. Well, the Prophet ﷺ said that the affair of the Muslim is strange. Anything bad happens to him, whatever happens to him is always good. When something bad happens to him and they remain patient, then that is good for them. And if something good happens to them and they praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the good, that is also good for them. And this only occurs with the believer. This only occurs with the believer. So for this reason, the Quran and Sunnah usually attributes evil to the creation or their actions, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's, from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's full perspective, the evil which He allowed to exist has good in actuality. So for instance, the Quran states, قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ الْفَلَقِ مِنْ شَرِّ مَا خَلَقَ. Say, I seek refuge in the Lord of the daybreak from the evil of that which He created. Right? Ibrahim alayhi salam, right? What did he say? He said, الَّذِي خَلَقَنِي فَهُوَ يَهْدِينِ. He is the one who created me, and He alone guides me. وَالَّذِي هُوَ يُطْعِمُنِي وَيَسْقِينِ. He is the one who provides me with food and drink. وَإِذَا مَرِضْتُ فَهُوَ يَشْفِينِ. And He alone heals me when I am sick. What happened here? SubhanAllah, look at this. Ibrahim alayhi salam, when attributing good, he attributed it to who? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He is the one who created me. He is the one who guided me. He is the one who provides me with food and drink. He is the one who heals me when I am sick, not when He makes me sick. So the evil was attributed to, he attributed it, or evil, right? I'm not going to say Ibrahim alayhi salam had evil in him, right? But you understand what I'm saying. The perceived evil is he attributed to himself. And this is echoed in the dua of the Prophet ﷺ, where he said, all good rests in your hands and evil is not attributable to you. Right? So evil as we perceive it can be found in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's creation, but there is nothing that necessitates that Allah has the same properties as His creation. For instance, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created humans with complexion. He created flowers that have certain scents. That does not mean that He has complexion or fragrance, right? The same way that we understand it and see it. So likewise, Allah creating people with unpleasant qualities, whether it's physical, behavioral, does not translate into a evil or ugly quality that belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So Ibn al-Qayyim al-Jawzi also adds, he says, when the slave commits an ugly prohibited act, what he did is certainly evil and sinful, and the Lord is the one who enabled him to be the doer of that deed, and this enable it from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This enable from Allah is justice, mercy, and correctness for him, making someone capable by acting freely is good, while its manifestation was evil and ugly. And by enabling, God has placed things where they belong, for that granting free will contains profound wisdom, for which he should be praised. So therefore, it's actually good and wise and beneficial, even if, sorry? Did somebody ask a question? Okay, never mind. Even if what the slave does is a flaw, a defect, and evil. Right? In other words, again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created beings with a degree of free will, which they sometimes use to act in evil ways. And in these cases, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not the direct cause of evil, but rather He is the original cause of this instrument which was used for evil, and the one who permits its existence for the greater good. Right? Now, with that being said, I'm going to conclude this topic with two things. Two things. Number one, two narrations. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in an authentic narration in Sahih Muslim, narrates for us a scene that is going to happen on the Day of Judgment. This scene that is going to happen is two people are going to step up before all of creation. The first one is going to be the man or the individual that suffered more than anybody else in this life. But he remained steadfast and patient in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He is going to be commanded, the angels are going to be commanded to take this man and dip him into paradise for one moment. Not even a second, a dip, like whoop, it's right back out. Right? And then before everybody, he's going to be asked one question. Have you ever suffered? What do you think his answer is going to be? By Allah, I don't even know what suffering is. What are you talking about, suffering? After 1 second in paradise, not even a second, a dip. Right? The opposite is also true. The opposite is also true. The Prophet ﷺ said that the person with the greatest life, all the luxuries, he had everything he wanted. Right? All the yachts, everything, whatever. All the desires, and didn't believe in Allah, or maybe believed but transgressed, disobeyed, is going to be commanded by the angels to be dipped in the hellfire for 1 second, a moment, a dip, whoop, right back out. Right? No, that sounds kind of positive. It's like more like a whoop, right? And then right back out. Scarier, right? So then, before everybody, Allah's going to ask this man, have you ever felt any joy? Have you ever felt any pleasure? What is he going to say? I don't even know what joy or pleasure is. My brothers and sisters, this hadith puts everything into perspective. Everything that we see in this world, everything that we experience through life, after 1 second in our eternal abode, we're going to forget it all. So I want to make sure that it's good. Another narration of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ tells us that once we see the amount of reward, the mountains of reward that those who suffered are going to get on the Day of Judgment, we're going to plead to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to go back to this life and our skin be cut up in tiny pieces with scissors just so we can experience the same reward. Crazy. So when we see our brothers and sisters in Gaza, we see them in Sudan, we see them in Yemen, and we're wondering what is going on, I promise you, on the Day of Judgment, you are going to wish that you guys switched places. And that's that optimism and the hope that we have in our religion. That's the optimism and the hope that we have. Right? And, yes, sorry. So the narration is, you can find it in Sunan al-Tirmidhi, where the Prophet ﷺ said that once we see the mountains of reward that those who suffered in this life get on the Day of Judgment, we are going to wish that we come back to this life and have our skin cut up in scissors just so we can experience that same reward. Right? Just so we can experience that same reward. But essentially, my brothers and sisters, the biggest thing is that this is an open book test. The choice is on you. Prophet ﷺ also said in another authentic narration that in the grave, right, we're going to see what would have been, or what would have, like, we're going to see our place in either paradise or the hellfire, right? And based on the answers that we provide in the grave, one of those doors are going to close up. Meaning what? Everybody in this room, and this is a scary and a hopeful hadith, so I like to mention this because it's a very well balanced, this is what we need to do as Muslims, right? We need to have a balance of hope and fear in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But this narration, what does it say? It says essentially, paraphrasing a little bit, is that every person in this room has a seat in paradise and a seat in the hellfire that is reserved for them. Your choice on which seat you're going to take. Right? So let's make it a good choice, inshallah. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us a happy eternity, inshallah ta'ala. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept. And if there's anything that I said or erred or mistranslated or didn't translate enough, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive us. May ask you guys for forgiveness. And whatever good that we learned today, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept because it is all from Him. Any questions in Jama'ah?
Jazakumullah khair, Sheikh Akram. Would like to ask, if you have a question, please come to the microphone. Please keep it to one question only per person. And keep the question as clear as possible so that we can have a clear answer and short answer. Inshallah, let's make it efficient. So by 10 p.m., inshallah, everyone will be out. So I expect everyone to come tomorrow at Fajr, inshallah. So please, if you have a question, come to the microphone. Or write it down on the paper and then hand it over, inshallah.
I'm sorry. One thing, I know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave lots of luxury to, for example, the Prophet Dawood alayhi salam and the Prophet Sulaiman alayhi salam. That disbeliever with the most luxury, did that disbeliever have the most luxury among all the people, or was that just the disbeliever with the most luxury of all the disbelievers?
That's a good question. When I looked at the commentaries for this narration, they didn't specify exactly what the case was. However, we also want to keep in mind that so-called luxuries aren't actually luxuries, they're also tests, right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us certain blessings to see what we will do with those blessings. First of all, any blessings that we have, we say alhamdulillah for those blessings, right? But the second thing, those blessings should be used in the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, when it comes to, for example, wealth, if someone becomes successful and they gain access to a large amount of wealth, and it closes the door of ibadah to them, right? It closes the door of ibadah to them, meaning that it causes them to engage in their desires, to neglect the Muslim community, not give to the poor, and kind of be arrogant, etc., 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 then that was actually a curse. That wasn't a gift. That wasn't a blessing. That was a curse. You failed. That was a curse. Now the opposite is if you do a massive amount of wealth, and immediately your first thought is, how can I use this to help Muslims? How can I use this to help the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Then congratulations, you were just blessed with a great gift. Right? So I preface that because what I want to say is that Dawood alayhi salam, Sulaiman alayhi salam, Dhul Qarnayn, who have been given great power and great Mansa Musa, right? And people in our Islamic history that have been given great power and great wealth, the common theme between all of them is that they use that wealth for good, right? Yeah.
Mansa Musa spent enough gold to literally crash the economies of several countries.
Yeah.
When he came back, all that gold he squandered was no longer there, and they crashed the economy of his own country.
Yeah, but his intention was good, right? His intention was to. Well, not necessarily, because in Egypt, I'll tell you something you may not know, in Egypt, right, most of the masajid that exist today can actually be connected to the Hajj trip of Mansa Musa. Because Mansa Musa, when he came and passed by Egypt for his Hajj trip, he donated a lot of wealth for awqaf, that those awqaf ended up becoming masajid in Egypt, right? So a lot of those things, a lot of those masajid in Egypt that you know, I don't know exactly which ones, but a big chunk of them are actually connected to the time that Mansa Musa went to Hajj and he dropped a lot of amounts of charity in Egypt, right? So very, very fascinating, very fascinating. Yes, Jazakallah.
Yeah, can we add also the existence of the good and the evil as the comparison? Let's take the castle you mentioned, that I wouldn't appreciate the 1,000 beautiful rooms unless I see the opposite, which are 3 bedrooms. I was sick for 5 days, a few days back, and that 5 days were terrible. I never felt how valuable the health is unless I went through this 5 day sickness. So the evil also gets you to appreciate what is the good. If there is no evil, then there is no good.
Absolutely, absolutely, beautifully said, right? Beautifully said. And when we go through times of hardship, we appreciate the times that are good, right? And yeah, it was a statement, right? It was a beautiful added statement. And another thing that I'll add to that as well is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, being the all-merciful, He's also the most just, right? So how can His justice manifest if there's nothing to give justice to, right? So you have to understand it from that perspective as well, right? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be the most just. One of the questions that I used to always get as an imam, right? Always get. Why do people go to the hellfire for eternity? Seems kind of harsh, right? Right? The same brother that asked me that, 2 weeks later, October 7th happened. 2 weeks later, October 7th happened, right? I sent him a message. I was like, remember the question you asked me, right? And he said, you know what he responded to me? He's like, never mind, I get it. I get it. There has to be justice. There has to be justice. When you see genocide unfolding and, people getting away with it, the only way for it to be fair is if they get their justice on the day of judgment, which is the only time that true justice is going to be established, right? It's not fair to the unjust or the oppressed for the oppressor to get the same reward for the oppressed struggle, right? That's injustice. That is what is not merciful. So as a matter of fact, the non-existence of hellfire is the injustice. You understand what I'm saying? Right? Because the two cannot be the same. They cannot be the same. Yes, sister. Wa alaikum salam.
My question is with regards to making dua during
Yes.
hardship or when we see hardship. So for example, Allah has already promised us that with hardship comes ease.
Yes.
So should we then be making dua for ease because that's already promised? Or with regards to say Palestine, we already believe that Al-Aqsa will be liberated. So then should we make dua to Allah to liberate Al-Aqsa because we already know that is promised? So what's the best dua to make during hardship or when we see it?
Yes. Beautiful question. So there's 2 things that I'll mention here. The first thing is, yes, you should always make dua for ease, right? Prophet ﷺ, in his daily adhkar, he said, Allahumma inni as'aluka al-afiyah, right? Oh Allah, I ask you for ease. I ask you for ease. And one day there was a young companion who was extremely ill. And some of the companions were saying that he's like abnormally ill. Like there's something wrong. And so the Prophet ﷺ went to visit him and he asked, what's wrong? And he said, I made a dua that Allah punishes me in this life instead of the next life. And the Prophet ﷺ was like, well, why would you make that dua? Right? Ask for ease. رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. Ask for that. Ask for the best in this life and the next, and protection from the hellfire, right? So I want to make dua for that. So actually the scholars, they discourage asking for patience. Unless you're in a situation that requires patience. Because if you're in a situation of ease and you ask for patience, how do you get patience? Hardship has to come, right? Hardship has to come in order for you to develop patience, right? So we ask for ease. Now the question is, because these things are promised to us, should we make dua for it? Yes, absolutely, right? Because the dua isn't necessarily a favor to Allah, it's a favor for us, right? It gives us that peace and comfort and that solace. وَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِي عَنِّي فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He told us what? That if the servant asks about me, makes dua to me, then know that I am near, right? Know that I am near. So that promise is there, but we make that dua because in and of itself, it's a virtuous thing. It builds our connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when we have a conversation with Him, right? It builds our connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when we raise our hands in desperation to Him. When we are desperate in dua, two things happen. One, we engage in more ibadah because we want that dua to be accepted, right? And the second is we refrain from evil deeds because we want the dua to be accepted. So in that process of you being desperate in your dua, you attain closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is the answer to the dua in the first place, because that's ultimately what we want at the end, right? Wallahu ta'ala. Jazakallah khair. Great question. Any questions on the mic first? Remember, one question per person. Just want to get through everybody. Go ahead on the mic.
It's not exactly a question, it's a statement. Is that spoiled people, they have to learn a lesson like Allah, like something hard has to happen on them, only they can learn. Like when I was younger, I used to be very spoiled, subhanAllah. But then something wrong happened to me, so I learned my lesson. So alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah, takbir. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Beautifully said, yeah. You want to learn the hard way or the easy way, right? That's what they say, right? Alhamdulillah. Any other questions in Jama'ah? Or you guys are mostly Egyptian here, right? Yeah, Jama'ah. Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
You mentioned that the situation we're in, the questioning of evil's existence has to do with the paradigm that a lot of people in society have. Individual thinking, prioritizing of individual over communities, over families. So what's your practical suggestions for deconstructing or reconstructing sort of a community-minded?
Yeah, I understood. You know, it's interesting because people want to mock the pursuit of paradise, but at the same time, we embrace what? We embrace all the painstaking years that's required in order for us to study, earn a degree, put some food on the table, have a roof over our heads, to secure a home that has limited walls. No matter how spacious it is, it's always going to be limited, right? We need food for energy. No matter how delicious food is, your main objective for eating food is what? To survive. No matter how good the food is, at the end of the day, you're eating food so that you survive. And so we all consider it fair. We need to invest years, we need to invest our time, our efforts, in order to achieve these limited, small manners, and it's completely fair. The whole world has to do it, and this is just the way the world works. But it's unfair to work for an unending, unimaginable bliss. It's ironic, right? And that is the framework we need to break, okay? And that is the idea that this worldly life is going to be the end-all be-all, and that's where I'm going to put my energy and attention and focus to. And this is something that unfortunately is very hard to break unless it is done at a foundational age. Okay? It's difficult for people at an older age to kind of break that mentality. And it is a culmination of centuries of neglect in this regard of spirituality that we see the results that we're seeing today, right? So the only way to counteract that is we're also going to have to put in the same effort to counteract that as well, right? So a lot of these things, anything that has to do with ism, societal issues and things like that, you're never going to have a one-night fix, right? But the best way to start is that in our homes, with our children, tell them the beauty of working hard for that unending, unimaginable bliss. And when we work hard for a pursuit of degree and food and all that kind of stuff, it is secondary in the sense that it is our means to that unimaginable, unattainable, or unimaginable, unending bliss, right? So when I work to make money so that I can use that money to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When I eat so that I have energy to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When I get married so that I can have a family which is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. At the end of the day, everything that I do in terms of hard work in this life is connected to paradise, is connected to Allah, and that is going to be how you, through hard work, achieve that unending, unimaginable bliss. So now, it's not just about the house, the food, the car, and that's it. But actually these are all just fleeting means to the beautiful end that I am looking for. Jazakallah khair. Fadl Habibi.
Assalamu alaikum. I have a question with a part A and B.
Yes.
There's two questions. Wait. Okay, I'll change it. It's one question, but I'd like you to repeat the answer from yesterday when I asked about the number of imams that you think would be beneficial to a community of this size.
Okay.
So the different categories that you broke that down into.
Yeah.
And then the actual question is, which of those three would you feel most comfortable in? That was the follow-up question that my wife actually asked.
Yeah. It's a great question. So the first thing is, first of all, I want to be sensitive to the thought that I know this masjid is looking for, an imam to begin with, right? So I don't want to put more pressure on the masjid to go and find more very quickly. But what I was mentioning yesterday was more about what the long-term vision for the community and the vision and the masjid should be, right? The unfortunate reality is that a one-stop shop imam is a very rare occurrence and not something you're going to find much of these days, right? And there's multiple reasons to it, right? Part of the reason is because a lot of imams and speakers are, asked to travel more, because you may not know this, but half of the masajid in America don't have imams. So there's almost like a responsibility on other imams to kind of visit other communities to help try to fill in that gap, right? So there's a lot of travel happening, which makes it difficult for imams to have that one-stop shop type of roles and responsibilities, okay? That's the first thing. The second thing is just financial, honestly. The world's expensive these days, right? So, unless the masjid is willing to provide something that is going to essentially render the imam not needing any secondary income, then they're going to need that flexibility to be able to get other income in order for them to support their family and support themselves and etc., right? Now with that being said, because of these two specific things, a long-term plan that I've seen been successful is you have 3 imams, right? In the sense that one serves as the ritual imam, meaning salah, the hifz program, nikah, janaza, the, rituals, essentially, okay? Then you have a community imam. This is the person that does halaqas, that does khutbas, that has office hours for counseling, that goes to the MSAs, goes to other masajid and builds connections with other communities, goes to the hospitals and visits the sick, goes to people's houses and families to counsel them and all that. That's a whole full-time job on its own. So that person can't be expected to lead salah 5 times a day at the masjid because he has so many responsibilities with the community that he's trying to have, right? And then the third is like the imam / youth director. This guy is purely focused on the youth, right? That's it. That's his job. He just focuses on the youth. You have these 3 as this is again, like I said, long-term vision, right? You have these 3 in place. You have the foundations. You have the setup for a very long, successful community, inshallah ta'ala. Right? Now, this follow-up question, which one would I be more comfortable with? The one that I'm doing now is the second one, right? Which is kind of like the community role at the masjid that I'm at right now, right? So because I have more experience in that, I'd probably be most comfortable in that position. Jazakallah khair. Follow-up?
No, not a follow-up. I just wanted a clarification that I led that question yesterday with the idea of a forward-thinking position. And I did not want to put him in the position to say that he needs 3 imams and he needs to share that role. It was, in my opinion, that a single imam is insufficient for a community. And that was the discussion I was having today.
I mean, every community that has 3 imams started with 1. So, it's a growth, right? But I'm just, we're talking about long-term plan, long-term vision. This does need to be something that's kept in mind for the years down the line, inshallah ta'ala. Any other questions? No, we can jump into some of the other questions here. So there's one, okay. This one has 2 questions and both of them are pretty good, okay? So the first one is, how would you address the issue of when guys get together and have questionable acts, right? Such as smacking each other in places and etc. In a joking way, but it's inappropriate and indecent, Okay? This is a good question because, okay, first of all, this is like, I don't know why, this is like this generation's weird culture that like guys you know, I saw this joke once where somebody says that, never mind, I'm not gonna share, okay, never mind. Anyways, it's not appropriate. But the question is a good question because as Muslims, we do need to have etiquette and proper adab and things like that. And as I mentioned before, as Muslims in Islam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam already put safeguards in place in order for us to not fall into behaviors that are indecent. So like I mentioned, right? Two men should not sleep in the same bed under the same blanket. If they have a separate blanket, it's actually, you know, that's allowed. But under the same blanket, they're not allowed to do that, right? So it's because it prevents anything from, you know, being indecent or protecting oneself from that. You're changing your clothes in front of somebody of the opposite, of the same gender, right? There's still a level of awrah that you have to maintain, right? There's still a level of awrah to maintain. So between guys, right, that awrah is still from the belly button to the knee, right? That still needs to be covered even when you're around guys. It's not something that's just free to let go of. So, you know, things like that, right? So it is important to keep in mind that we hold ourselves to a higher standard. And so things like that's, you know, a lot of guys in today's culture are engaging in, we do want to avoid that, right? Now with that being said, there are also things in other cultures that might be seen as weird here that aren't necessarily weird in our cultures. Like, again, a lot of you here are Egyptian, right? You'll see guys holding hands down like just friends walking with, they're holding hands together in Egypt, right? It's very common, it's normal, right? When two men meet each other, two Arab men, what happens? Kiss each other on the cheek, right? So you have to kind of consider also cultural aspects too. What is considered indecent, immoral behavior in that culture, right? Again, you know, as I mentioned yesterday when we were talking about culture, as long as it doesn't contradict the Sharia, right? You know, so, you know, but yeah, so anyways, with that specific thing, if this is something that is happening in your guys' community, please stop, right? It's not cute, it's not attractive, it's weird, and you know, it's not befitting of a Muslim to engage in indecent acts like this. Okay, the other question this person had, which is also a good question, is what do you think about how career-driven young women that don't prioritize marriage and family, yet we have guys who are planning to get married in a more traditional family structure, right? Or wanting to get married in a more traditional family structure. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to mention here is it's important to keep in mind that after being a slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the greatest role that a man can have is to be a good husband and a good father. Aside from being a servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the greatest role that a woman can have is being a good mother and a good wife, right? Because our deen is built on the family structure. Our communities are built on family. The family unit is strong, the community is strong. The family unit breaks, the community breaks. This is how it has worked in all societies, and it's how it works today. We're seeing the crumble of communities and societies today because family structures are being broken, right? We're seeing a lot of infidelity, we're seeing a lot of adultery, families are breaking apart, a lot of divorce, families are breaking apart, right? So it's difficult in that sense. Now I say that because our priority needs to be whatever will help me fulfill that honorable role is going to be what I prioritize in my life. Meaning, for example, for a guy, you are required to be the breadwinner of the family, okay? It's hard, but you are required to be the breadwinner of the family. So your career that you build is a means for you to fulfill that honorable role that you have. Meaning that the career is not the priority, but the priority is you fulfilling that role. Understood? Right? So if the career comes at the expense of fulfilling your roles at home, leading the family, protecting, the family, making sure that the family is safe, right? Making sure that your children are safe, providing for your children, making sure that your children are receiving good education, all these obligations that the father and the husband have, right? If your career comes at the expense of that, then your priorities are off, right? Your priorities are off. So with that being said, it is important for both young men and young women to prioritize their life based on these roles, okay? Now, if after a wife or a mother is able to fulfill her roles in the marriage and then have extra time where there is a career that she wants to pursue, then alhamdulillah, no problem, right? But if both parents are working, trying to provide for the family or trying to be breadwinners of the family, and then the children are left at home with a nanny or put into preschool or put into daycare and childcare, then I hate to break it to you, you're not raising your kid. You're not raising your child, somebody else is raising your child, and you don't know what the heck they're teaching them. You don't know, right? And it's been proven hundreds of times, psychological studies, even secular psychological studies that have tried to break norms of family structure, acknowledge that when there's a parent in the household, then the success of the child grows. And then it even is more successful when that a parent in the household is the mother. Because the mother is more empathetic, the mother is more caring, the mother is kinder, is more merciful, and more capable of effectively, emotionally intelligently teaching young children, right? It's not a coincidence that we see more women in teacher roles, that we see more women in caring roles, which is a very honorable thing because these are the hardest things. Teachers are not appreciated enough and they need to be appreciated a lot more. It's the hardest job I have ever seen, being a teacher. It's the hardest job I've ever seen being a child caretaker. It's difficult. It requires a lot of energy, patience, sympathy, right? Empathy, emotional intelligence. So wallahu alam. But anyways, the khulas of the kalam, the summary is what I think is because the most honorable roles in our deen is being a mother and a father, or a mother or a father, or a husband and a wife, after being a slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then we need to prioritize based on those roles, right? And this is a massive disconnect that we have in our communities, right? And so then we'll have, we have a huge marriage problem, where there's women who are single, right, reaching their 30s and their late 30s, and then we have men who are trying to get married at 22, 23, 24, but the ones that are available is the women who are in their 30s, and the women in their 30s definitely don't want a man that is in their 20s, right, especially their young 20s. And so there's a massive disconnect that's happening, right? So what I was telling some of the guys yesterday, after we went out, after yesterday's halaqah, is this, right? The wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that we don't know what is good for us. Meaning, if there's ever an opportunity that comes your way, man or woman, brother or sister, there's ever an opportunity that comes your way for marriage, whether it was in your plan or not, don't shut down the opportunity off the bat. Hear it out. Okay? And I say this because this is exactly what happened with my wife and I. We both got married when we were 21, and in our original plan in our heads, we weren't even thinking about getting married till 27, 28. The opportunity came, we decided to be open-minded, and just hear it out, and things worked out, alhamdulillah, right? And I think constantly, had I not been open-minded, I don't know where I would be today. I'd be stuck today, because I don't think I've personally met, I don't want to say that, but actually had a conversation outside of work and imam duties and answering questions with another woman since my wife. I don't know where I would be. I don't know how I would be able to find marriage. But the opportunity came in a time that I did not think was the right time. But I trusted Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and she did the right thing, alhamdulillah. She did the same thing, alhamdulillah, right? And we were able to connect, and we're like, okay, maybe this actually will work. even though it's not our plan. It's not that we originally wanted. So those two things, again, prioritize your life based on those roles, and when opportunities come, don't reject the opportunity or close it off just because it wasn't in your original plan, right? If you are emotionally mature, you're physically mature, right? Then you technically have the ability to get married, right? And so once you find somebody that's compatible, alhamdulillah. Okay, let me look at some other questions here. I'm sorry, I can't read this question at all. What would the rules? I don't want to call anybody out, but I'm sorry, I can't read this question. So I don't know if I should hold it up and the person comes up, but then that defeats the purpose of the anonymous question, right? So forgive me, I'm not going to be able to answer this because I can't read it. So, yeah, it's this one. So the question is, how to deal with a family member who supports LGBTQ and is gay and identifies as gay. You're always going to have disagreements with family, right? That's just how society is, how families are. You know, I have family members that are religious and non-religious, and then when I ever interact with the ones who are non-religious, not even just non-religious, unfortunately have some family members that have even left the deen completely. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide them back. Please say ameen, ameen. But when I interact with them, again, as I've been kind of preaching already, don't treat them any differently than you would treat anybody else, right? If the conversation comes up, there's no problem in you sharing the way that you feel or the opinion that you hold or your Islamic view on the issue. And again, ادعوا بالتي هي أحسن, respectfully. One of the worst things that we can do is when someone that's already on edge with these issues, and then when the topic comes up, you just start attacking. Like there was no hope in that to begin with. Like, like you didn't even give them a chance to hear you out, because you just started attacking, right? Like I remember one time when I was in college, and it still bothers me to this day because I know that brother was sincere. But we were in college, and we were tabling for Palestine because it was May 15th, which is the day of the Nakba, right? We were raising awareness for the Nakba in Palestine. There's like this frat boy who rolls up to the table, right? And he basically asked the question about, I don't remember the exact question, but it was about something that he had seen in the media. He says, I saw something like this, is this true? Talking about, you know, Palestine and things like that. Obviously anything in American media about Palestine, especially like, not just even now, but like 5, 6 years ago, is going to be extremely misrepresented. And I can tell by the person's face, he was sincerely asking. Like, I'm asking, is this true? I want to hear from you, right? Because this topic is already something that is extremely emotional, some people at the table jumped on it. They started being like, why do you believe all these lies? And just attacking, right? Immediately, I saw his face turn from like hopeful conversation. He just got defeated and he left. And I just kept thinking, I'm like, man. I was like, man, okay, whoever was able to read this, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you. And you are a hero. Allahu Akbar. So, and to this day, I think about it often and I'm just like, wow, like I think that if we sat down and we explained, you know, the whole history to him and we explained why, you know, things need to be put in context, then maybe we would have another ally today, right? But that initial conversation just completely turned that person away, right? And so similarly here, when people are bringing up these conversations that are already so emotionally charged, we have to be the ones that rise above that hold ourselves to a higher standard and respectfully engage in these discussions while not compromising our beliefs. Right? So when I talk to my family members who are not Muslim and back home, sometimes they ask me questions about Islam. So that we know you're an imam now, so we have some questions. And I engage with them, and I'm not like, why are you not Muslim? How dare you, you kafir? No, I'm not going to do all that, right? Because if I love them, I want them to come back. And so how am I going to get them to come back if I'm just yelling at them? No one's ever... Yaqeen did a study where they asked Muslims that have left the deen, why did you leave the deen? You know what the number one answer was? It wasn't a theological issue. It wasn't like a fiqh mas'ala that they had doubts about. I had a bad time at the masjid. Somebody treated me this way. Abuse. Right? Somebody yelled at me when I asked a question at the masjid. It just turned me off and I just turned away and then just went down the path. Right? And that was it. That's the number one reason. And what do we do as Muslims? We always flex our muscles, right? We're like, nobody can debate us. Right? We're superior in intellect, we have the best religion, we have the most logical religion. Is it true? 100% it's true. I'm not doubting it at all, right? I get that satisfaction too when I see Muhammad Hijab destroy a Muslim hater in a debate. I get that satisfaction too, no problem. But the reality is, right, the fact that we are still the clear truth, yet somebody has been abused so much that they still feel the need to leave the clear truth is a problem. Big problem. Right? So, wallahu a'lam. This is the way that I would advise to approach it. Alright, what would be the rules of those providing gender-related surgeries under the Sharia law? This is something that is not defined in the books of fiqh. So therefore it would fall under the category of ta'dil, which means that it would be up to the judge, right? The judge would ascribe what they think to be a rightful rule or law or punishment or whatever it may be under the Sharia law, right? And there's some caveats that have to be mentioned here. One thing is that when it comes to there's why am I forgetting the term? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I'm sorry. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has, I'm forgetting the term, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has the hudud punishments, right? Why can't I remember the term? Khair, no worries, okay. It's not that important. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has something called hudud punishments, which these are punishments that are prescribed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, right? Or in the authentic sunnah, right? These are prescribed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and they're defined. The crime is defined, how to convict the crime is defined, and then the punishment is defined. These things cannot be changed at all, right? Anything outside of the hudud is considered to be a punishment of ta'dil, which means that it's up to the discretion of the judge. The caveat here is from a Sharia perspective, no ta'dil can be as harsh as a had. Okay? You can't reach the level of had. So that would be the case. And a qadi, a judge, is preferably going to be someone who the community appoints as being someone who is masterful of the Sharia law, masterful of fiqh, masterful of jurisprudence. And so think of it as like the fuqaha, the muftis are like lawyers, and the judge is the qadi, right? The qadi would be the one who would ascribe the punishment, and the muftis are the ones who are kind of like advising the judge on what he should do, right? But at the end of the day, the qadi is the one who is going to have that final decision. So what is the rule? There's no defined rule in our Sharia. Therefore, it's going to be up to the judge. Yes?
Like the previous question, when you have a family member or like committing a sin or doing that,
Yeah.
is it something like about the I love somebody for the sake of Allah and I dislike them when they are on a sinful or a ma'siyah? I think like as a part, it's his rights on me to show that I dislike the action
dislike you as a person, but I dislike what you are on right now. And I pray for Allah that you come back. And even for the Prophet ﷺ, his uncle was mushrik. He would still go to him. He has a relationship with him, but he was always like reminds him, like saying, even at the last moment, he wanted him to be a Muslim.
Yeah.
So what do you think about that?
Yeah, no, great question. So, first of all, I just want to kind of make a small correction, if you don't mind. But when it comes to, the dislike for the sake of Allah, the scholars also mentioned that we need to dislike for the dislike for the sin, not the individual, right? So you want to make sure that that's clear, right? Yeah, jazakallah khair. But with the second question, yeah, you're correct, right? You want to be able to, show that you have that care and concern, and bring them to the right path. And that's kind of what I was trying to mention with the previous question, how to have that care and concern and bring them to that path, right? Now, it's going to vary based on the individual, but like if you look at the life of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, every person he gave da'wah to them based on what they are receptive to. So there are some people that the Prophet ﷺ, they were not necessarily receptive to the message of Islam itself, but when he exemplified great character in front of them, that's what caused them to accept Islam, right? So there's some people that are like that. There's other people who, they might have a more debate type nature, right? They might question you, and then when you prove them wrong, they're like, okay, I respect that. And that's what might cause them to accept Islam. It's like the logical side, the philosophical side, and things like that, right? One example I can give is the example of Rukan, the Sahabi Rukan. Rukan was the wrestler of Mecca. He was like the Khabib of Mecca, right? No one can beat this guy, okay? But he was not a Muslim, right? Khabib is Muslim, alhamdulillah, right? Alhamdulillah, right? But Rukan, he was the wrestler of Mecca. So, and he did not like Islam, and he was not a Muslim. One day he was crossing, the Prophet ﷺ and him were walking by each other, and Prophet ﷺ called out to Rukan and said, Rukan, where are you going? And Rukan, he said, I don't want to hear from you today. I'm not interested. He said, no, don't worry about all that. I want to wrestle you. I challenge you to a wrestling match. And so Rukan was like, oh, yeah? Like now I'm interested, right? And the Prophet ﷺ said, under one condition. If I win, you accept Islam. And he said, bet, no problem. I've never lost. I'm undefeated, right? He's like, if you win, then clearly the help of Allah is with you, so it must be true, right? He didn't say that part. I'm adding that part, right? But they went, and like the whole city of Mecca came together. Right? Muhammad Ali and George Foreman had what? Rumble in the jungle? This is Rumble in the desert, inshallah, right? So the whole city of Mecca comes together to watch this wrestling match happen. Okay? Round one starts. Within seconds, the Prophet ﷺ had him flat on his back on the ground. Right? Body slams Rukan. Rukan gets up. He says, no, it's not possible. It's a fluke. Beginner's luck. Right? Try again. Tries again, it happens again. And then a third time, 3 times in a row. Body slam Rukan, the greatest wrestler Mecca has ever seen. Prophet ﷺ did that. Right? What does he do? He stands up. Ashhadu la ilaha illallah, ashhadu annaka Rasulullah. I bear witness that you are, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only one God, and I bear witness that you are the messenger of Allah. He says that directly to Prophet Muhammad. So he didn't talk to him. He didn't show great character with him. He body slammed him. We're talking about good character. He body slammed him. But he knew this was the language of Rukan. And this is how I'm going to bring him to the deen. Right? And this is how he did that, right? So now take that example and just apply it to everybody. You're going to have to see what each person is receptive to. And this is where emotional intelligence is a really hard thing to do. And we learn, but it's a very crucial thing. And that's why the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was the most emotionally intelligent. Just like the example of Amr ibn As radiallahu anh, when he was so sure that he was the most beloved to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. You guys know the story? He was so sure, right? And so the companions, they were like, no, like you're tripping, right? Like they went to the Prophet ﷺ and he said, oh, Aisha, my wife, right? And then they asked, okay, that makes sense, but like, what about after that, right? From the men, min rijal. And he says, well, Abuha, right, Abu Bakr. And then he kept going, Umar, Uthman, Ali. And then he says at the end of the narration, what? Like, I stopped asking out of fear of being the last one. But what's beautiful is he was so short because the Prophet ﷺ, when he interacted with him, made him feel that way. Who knows what Amr ibn As was? This is Fath Misr, by the way, right? Amr ibn As is the one who is the reason why all you Egyptians in this room are Muslim today. He's the reason. Okay? So Amr ibn As is great. We have a lot of respect for him. But Amr ibn As was a general of the disbelievers for 20 years of prophethood. Meaning he killed Sahaba, meaning he oppressed Muslims for 20 years. And in 3 short years, not even 3 because Prophet ﷺ passed away after 3 years, so maybe in 1 or 2 years of interacting with Prophet ﷺ, this man, Rasulullah ﷺ, made Amr ibn al-As feel like he was the most beloved despite that history. Beautiful. It adds a whole new level to the narration. Because when we say companion, we just assume it was a companion that was just like amongst the Prophet ﷺ all this time. No. This was a companion that accepted Islam way later. And for 20 years, he was a general of the Quraysh, of the disbelievers, and killed and oppressed Muslims for decades. And he was still felt like he was the most beloved to the Prophet ﷺ. Right? Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reunite us with him on the day of judgment. Allahumma ameen. Any other questions, Jama'ah?
Yeah, I just gotta say this is the most challenging interview I think I've ever seen. Yeah, first time I've ever been to something like this. I guess I just wanted to kind of speak on what she was talking about. And I'm a social worker and I work with adults, and I used to work with youth. If I was going to give some advice, I would just say be like open to the youth that are LGBTs if they're your kids, because suicide rates are pretty high for LGBT youth, and you don't want someone that's already at risk of suicide, being homeless, and Muslim, because then they're more likely to be assaulted. So, yeah, I would just say use empathy and listen, and yeah.
Beautiful insight.
Yeah, you're doing a good job.
Barakallah feek, Habib. Barakallah feek. Any other questions?
I have a quick question. I know you have an undergrad degree in psychology. Are you considering to build on that and take next steps or do some counseling certification?
I definitely think that every imam should be trained in counseling in some way, right? Fortunately, we're not, but they should be, because it's one of the issues, probably not just a issue, but one of the major issues that imams have to deal with. So, inshallah ta'ala, if everything goes smoothly, I'll be graduating from my Alamiya program in June, and then afterwards we can look into getting some more training in terms of counseling and training and psychological help, so I can, in the long run, benefit whatever community in the best way possible, inshallah. I'm cool ending early too, by the way. Like it's no problem, right? Like 10 more minutes of sleep is great. Yeah, inshallah. Sorry? Am I Masri? I am Masri, yes. Yes, I'm Masri, yes. Yes, if you do have any questions, I'll be here. So any brothers or sisters that have any questions, I'll hang out, I'll stick around. And then if you want to ask any questions privately, inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaykum assalam wa barakatuh. Jazakallah khair, Sheikh Akram. Very detailed day and busy day. Tomorrow, inshallah, we have 2 more events. So I'd like first to thank Sheikh Akram, and thank everyone for coming today and make this a successful event. Event without good audience interacting, it's not a successful one. Again, reminder tomorrow, the first event, Fajr is 6:30. Please come, join us, pray Fajr. Then after Fajr, inshallah, we can have khatara. There's no breakfast to do tomorrow, but we can have a casual one if that will bring you. Dhuhr Iqama is 12:30, would be followed by a youth talk. It's for 11 years plus. For youth, please come and join us. The topic is manners of Muslims, rights of others in Islam. Again, we humbly ask everyone, please, to help us by filling up the community feedback form. It was sent earlier. Inshallah, we're going to send it again. We need your feedback and input. That will help us, inshallah. Finally, we'd like to remind everyone of the Pure Hands event tomorrow. It's at 5 p.m. in Embassy Suites in Tigard. This is a dinner to support our brothers and sisters in Yemen. They need more than just our prayers. They need our support. So please support that effort. Jazakumullah khairan. Registration is free. Sure. Jazakumullah khairan.